What's up, everyone?
What's up, everyone? Hello, everyone. Hey, guys. Welcome to today's video. I'm Daniel.
I'm here in Iowa,
Gold Coast Casino.
I'm ready to give you guys another vlog.
So, welcome to part 2 of my symmetric versus asymmetric chords test. To recap, the hypothesis is that the asymmetric ball, which we have the reality, 900 global reality in this case, is going to be earlier rolling and smoother at the back end. Meanwhile, the idle cosmos, which is our symmetric ball, is going to have a less rounded shape where it's going to hook more on the back end and conserve more energy for later. They're both at 2,000 grit. That's all I'm going to be using for this part of the test because we're now on a house shot, completely fresh house shot behind me on lane 7. No balls have been thrown on it. We've got Spectro going. The same layout on both balls. We got a 45 by 4.5 by 45 on both balls. Just very standard, very medium, layout. I just finished recording part 1. So be sure, if you haven't seen it yet, to check out part 1 where we did 2 different sports shots to test the true difference between these balls and their cores. And keep in mind that both of them have the same RG and differential numbers. The only thing different is the intermediate mass bias number, intermediate differential mass bias number, which is in the reality, which is why that first angle comes into play only on that ball, which is a 45, like I said. So without further ado, I'm going to throw some shots, talk you through the difference, and then we'll go from there. And for the record, I'm going to be standing and looking in the same spot every single shot with both balls. And after we're done with the test today, I'm going to be heading home and recording the rest of the video on my computer to show you guys and break down all the Specto data that I have from these shots. So as you saw, that one went very forward off the end of the pattern, missed the head pin right. We're going to throw another shot with the reality and then go to the cosmos. Once again, very forward off the end of the pattern, a very smooth ball motion. They are at 2,000 grit, so just keep that in mind. But yeah, that shot definitely flat 10, almost had the messenger come across, but just not enough energy to go through the pins to get that 10 out. All right, so now to try the same line with the idle. See there, the difference appears to be pretty clear. It had a lot more energy going off of the back end, and it definitely went through the pins really well and kicked that 10 out right at the end. So that's a good sign for the idle. Throw one more shot there to repeat our results if we can and see what happens. Yeah, that looked absolutely great. Let's check the Spectro real quick. So the second shot that I threw with the reality earlier hooked at 41 feet. Then we had the idle cosmos hook at 42 feet and then at 41 feet on that last shot. That's probably due to the fact that I got it a little bit left on the last shot, and it probably stayed in the oil just a hair longer because this is a house shot. It's got more oil in the middle than it does on the outside. So we're going to try 4 and 2 left. So I'm going to move my feet 4 boards to the left. I'm going to move my eyes 2 boards to the left. It puts me at 14 arrows with my eyes. And we're going to try and throw 2 shots with each ball. I did get it a hair right of where I wanted to down lane, but you can still see that ball motion is very forward off the end of the foil pattern. So let's see if I do that again, if it does the exact same thing. So that one I actually missed a lot left and got it into the oil, but I'm going to take a look at Spectrum. So that one was 14-9. It's not a bad shot, but it definitely went further down the lane than it had earlier, so I'm going to check the Idle Cosmos from that same spot. You can tell too that whenever you get the Asym ball, the reality, into the oil, that it goes through the pins better than if it's not in the oil. So that shot with the Idle Cosmos was very close to where the first shot with the reality was after we made the move. So, as you can see there, I left a light mixer 7. Didn't quite have as much on the back end as we needed to carry. So I'm going to try and recreate the shot and see what it does. Okay, so that one I got to 6 down lane. And you can see that it went further than any shot we've had with the reality so far. It went 44 feet down the lane before it started to hook. So you can definitely tell that the Idle in itself wants to go just a little bit further, about a foot further down the lane than the reality, which is something that I saw on the sport shots as well, was that the reality would consistently, not every single time, because there was an outlier in there, but consistently it would go 1 foot further down the lane compared to the reality before it would hook. So I'm going to move a little bit more left. I'm going to make another 4 and 2 left. So that's going to put me at 16. So 1 board left of the 3rd arrow with my target. And we're going to throw 2 shots with each ball. Now, as you'll come to notice, especially when I'm throwing the reality, the Asym ball, that this is a lot of angle for a fresh house shot, you know, for my speed and rev rate. But that doesn't nullify any of the test results. So I want to say that that ball went very forward off the end of the pattern and didn't carry. Left a light mixer 7, which is something that we've seen out of that ball on sport shots as well in part 1. So now I'm going to throw 1 more shot with that and then go to the Cosmos. That shot looked really good. I naturally just came around it a hair more, you know, just intuitively, because now I'm playing in the oil. And the Asym ball looks really good in the oil because it wants to dig in a little bit sooner, from what I'm seeing. You know, I still have not inherently shown that based on the spectro data yet, but I'm about to after we about to go through all that data with you guys after I wrap up here. So now we're going to throw the Idle Cosmos and try to recreate those 2 shots. So with those shots too, since I was more in the oil, it hooked at 44 feet, the reality did. So now let's see the Idle Cosmos and see how, at what feet that it reacts. So that first shot was not in the oil as much as the reality was. I sent it to the right down lane, and so it hooked 2 feet sooner at 42 feet and kind of lost some energy on the back end, which makes sense. So now let's see if I can recreate kind of putting the ball in the oil and see what happens. So that one I missed both ways. I missed a little left at the arrows and a little right down lane. Covered more boards, came around it just a touch more like I did on the second shot with the reality. But you can see the clear difference. It went 44 feet, even when it hit the dry, it still went down the lane 44 feet. Checked and went through the pins really good, but I want to throw 1 more shot with it to get some more consistent results. So I went in and threw 2 more. I threw 1, still on a similar line, just still coming around it a hair more. But that second one is the key. You know, I missed in the oil on purpose, made sure to get it in the oil like I did with the reality on the second shot with it. And what you saw is, at least what I saw and what you can see in the video, is a hair more energy stored down lane, a hair more violent reaction down lane. It's not as forward. Really wanted to take off. It went 44 feet before it started to hook. Same as the reality. I mean, you're getting past the end of the pattern at that point, so it really makes sense, even when you're in the oil, that it's still only hooking at 44 feet. But you can tell which one had a little more energy when it got there. And that was definitely the Idle Cosmos. The reality was just too forward off the end of the pattern to give a consistent back-end reaction like the Idle Cosmos was, where it was consistently coming off the pattern a little more at an angle, a little more angular to get it to come off the back end sharper. So hopefully that shows a visualization of what we're going to go through in just a minute for the last section of this video, and to interpret the results. So thanks guys, and I'll see you when I get home.
Alright, hello again guys. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, I'm going to stop you here and say check out the banner right now on your screen to make sure that you watch part 1 to see the difference between symmetric and asymmetric cores on Sports Shot, and kind of show my views on the data, kind of deciphering it and looking over some major points of the data through Specto from what I gathered on Sports Shots, 2 different Sports Shots. But for this part, this is part 2, we're now going over just a house shot only with a reality, 900 global reality as our asymmetric ball, and an Idle Cosmos as our symmetric ball for this test. Now, once again, I'm not setting out to prove anything. I'm not setting out to throw any companies under the bus. That's absolutely not my goal here. My goal is to simply just take some data points, show them to you guys, and interpret them the best that I can. And so let's get into it. So I want to start with showing you the same thing I showed in part 1, and that is an article on Storm Bowling's website that's titled Symmetric versus Asymmetric Cores. And I just want to read the highlighted part to you guys again, just to refresh in case you watched part 1 or in case you're skipping it. So, bowlers who favor the use of an asymmetric core need a little extra help curving the ball. These balls rev up fast and finish strong with a more aggressive movement down lane. Asymmetrical balls are great for heavy amounts of oil or longer patterns which don't provide a lot of friction, while symmetrical balls are typically smoother and yield a benchmark type of reaction that are more controllable. Symmetricals have 2 principal moments of inertia, x and y axes, and asymmetricals have 3, x, y, and z. This greater degree of asymmetry is responsible for the highly dynamic moves asymmetrical balls can create. So, that's a great write-up, but I don't seem to find that I agree with that based on the data that I've had. Now let's look at what another manufacturer, Motive, has to say on their website. This is on Motive's website under symmetrical versus asymmetrical. So it says symmetric balls, I'm just going to read the 3 bullet points. Symmetrical balls produce a smoother and more predictable motion when encountering friction. They're typically better for rev-dominant players, and with the new rule changes, CG placement will not matter for performance. And then asymmetric balls produce a more pronounced and sharper motion when encountering friction, typically better for speed-dominant players, and the added variable of intermediate differential allows for more layout possibilities. So, let me talk about what I agree with and then what I disagree with. So what I agree with is obviously both manufacturers, I think, are absolutely right whenever they say, the added variable of intermediate differential allows for more layout possibilities. That's how Motive says it. And then Storm says a little more technical definition and just say that symmetricals have 2 principal moments of inertia, x and y axes, and asymmetricals have 3, x, y, and z. There's no way to argue against that. That's absolutely right. I agree with that 100%, simply because there's an added variable in an asymmetrical core. The placement of the CG doesn't really matter with symmetric balls, and with asymmetric balls, although the CG placement does not matter still, the mass bias placement matters heavily for asymmetric bowling balls, to determine how soon that it starts off your hand and so on. Now, in this test, as you saw there in the first portion of this video, 45 degrees by 4.5 inches from pin to PAP by 45 degrees is our given layout. Basically, I chose that because it's right in the middle of the road. It's a very middle layout. Literally everything about it's in the middle. But I want to point out something, and that's that first angle, like I was just talking about, with like that X, Y, and Z axes, kind of breaking down X and Y, all that from Storm's website here. I'm just trying to point out the first angle doesn't matter on the symmetric ball, but it's still 45. But the asymmetric ball, the reality, it does matter. So just keep that in mind. All that determines is how soon that the ball starts off, starts up off of my hand, and then the 4.5 is how much flare potential. 3 3/8 is the max. So 4.5, is a little bit away from that, but not a ton away from that. It's right in the medium range. And then 45 for the last angle just determines how like smooth the ball is going to be. Just to simply state it, on the back end, it determines the length of the roll phase and where it starts and so on. A low angle is going to give a very pronounced motion down lane, and a high angle is going to give a very, it looks like it's bleeding out type of motion down lane. That's just the very basic blanket statement for layouts. If you want to learn more about layouts, check out the video that's in the card on your screen now. I did a whole in-depth video on layouts and how to lay out a bowling ball as well, just to explain them to you. So let's get into the specto data. Okay, guys, so first of all, I do apologize. I didn't realize until I was editing the video back here at my apartment. I didn't realize that it was very difficult to see the ball motion during this portion of the video. I didn't realize with where the camera was set up that I was so much in the way of the lane. So that's truly my fault. I'm not trying to pull anything, or anything like that. And that's why, I'm glad we have the specto data here to show and to kind of just give another perspective on it, because visually, yes, you can see it, the difference in the ball motions, but I want to break it down in the specto data and show you guys something. So first of all, let's go over what I was talking about when I said that the ball was hooking at like 44 feet, for example, just throw a number out there. So what I meant by that was that's what Specto says here as breakpoint distance. So that's the point where the ball is breaking, basically where it has exited the pattern, or at least it's about to, and it's starting up that roll phase and it's rolling towards the pocket now, because you have three phases of ball motion. You have a skid, a hook, and a roll. And so once the hook phase ends and that roll phase begins, that's where your breakpoint's going to be, and it's going to be rolling into the pocket from there. Let me go over 2 shots to start with, and then we'll go over 2 more after that and kind of break it down. So we're going to be looking at shots number 12, that's this one that I've highlighted right here, and then shot number 13 right here. So 12 was thrown with the reality, the asymmetric ball. So what we saw out of that one was it was at 13.8 at the arrows, as you can see in this column here. And then the pattern exit board was 6.7, and the breakpoint was 5.8. And that was at 42 feet. So that breakpoint that you see here, 5.8, that's where it was at 42 feet. It was on the 5.8 board at 42 feet. So now, something else you see is that it entered the pocket. This is what entry board means. It entered the pocket, it hit the pins at the 16.2 board, which means it went pretty light. This is one of the shots that I showed in the video. So now let's look at the next shot. So then this one was thrown with the Idle Cosmos, which is the symmetric ball for this test. So shot number 13 here. So it was thrown over 13.9 at the arrows. So see how close that is? It's 0.1 of a board off. And then the pattern exit was 6.4, which is 0.3 boards difference between the 2 shots. And the breakpoint board was at 5.4, meaning it was 0.4 or 2/5 of a board to the right of where that the reality was thrown the shot before. Now here's the key difference, 2 key differences really. So it had a breakpoint distance of 44 feet, so it went 2 feet longer than the reality, okay? And then you look at the entry board, and it's at 16.5, so it's even a little left of the reality when it hit the pins, whenever it entered the pocket. And so that means that it was a little higher in the pocket, which means that it had a little more shape to it down lane when it encountered the friction, which is at the end of the pattern because it's, dry on the back end. And so here's the key point is that you can tell that with this data right here, just between these 2 shots, that the reality rolled sooner and used more of its energy earlier than the idle cosmos. And here's how I know that. Not only because it rolled 2 feet sooner, which is quite a big difference as we've seen in this test, because in part one of in the video part one, we saw that the main difference consistently was 1 foot different. This one's actually 2 feet different. So that's double the amount of difference that we've seen so far. And then also you can see that at 44 feet, and then 16.5 was where the idle cosmos entered the pocket, whereas 16.2 was where the reality entered the pocket. And you got to remember that the reality was just a sliver of a board to the left already when it exited the pattern, because it exited at 5.8 and the idle cosmos exited at 5.4, and yet still the reality finished to the right of where the idle cosmos finished. That's quite interesting. But let's see if we can show this with another similar shot. And so I'm going to show you 2 more shots here, shots number 8 and shots number 9. So let's take a look at shot number 8 right here. So that's this one here, and then shot number 9 directly below it. So shot number 8. This would have been with the reality again. So we have the reality at 12.2, and it exited the pattern at 6.7. Breakpoint was 5.9. And it was at 43 feet, as we see here, entered the pocket at 14.1. Now let's look at when I threw the symmetric ball, the idle cosmos. So it was 12.6 at the arrows, so 2/5 of a board again, difference. And then, as we see here, they both exited the pattern at exactly 6.7, and the breakpoint was at 6.1 for the idle cosmos. And you might wonder why that's different. Well, it's slightly different because of the angle here from the board at the arrows, but also because it went 1 foot further. Now, that's still a very, very minimal sliver of a difference. That's, a 1/5 of a board, a 1/5 of an inch, because that's 0.2 inch of an inch. And so it broke 1 foot later at 44 feet, which is consistent with what we saw on the sport shots. And the interesting thing is that it entered the pocket at 15.2, which is very, very light, by the way. Whereas, directly the shot before it with the reality was at 14.1, and yet it started aboard sooner. And it was even in the dry a little bit more because it was a little bit right at the break point, overall. And it covered less boards, technically, left to right than it did, than the idle cosmos did. The idle cosmos actually technically covered more boards right to left, if you want to put it that way. Although for the sake of this study, I'd rather talk about front to back, because what you're really seeing out of this is that the 900 global reality read sooner, 1 foot sooner, and did not have the energy on the back end to go to the pocket. It was very, very light. That's 14.1. You're not really going to be hitting head pin at that point. Just maybe barely. But with 15.2, the idle cosmos here, what you see out of that is that it's hooking later, storing a little bit more energy for the back end, and coming at more of a sharpness to it rather than the reality, which was going very forward. And so looking at things like that are extremely important for the sake of this study. And I want to challenge you guys out there, viewers, to kind of think about this and think about what you've seen in your bowling as well. Kind of think about what that you've seen with symmetric balls that you've thrown, asymmetric balls that you've thrown, and kind of think about the differences that you've seen as well. There's a lot more data here that I'm not going to break down for sake of time. I wanted to hit some key points there, and once again I'll reiterate that I'm only human, so some of these shots you did not see in the video, simply because they were really bad shots, and they would have thrown off, they would have taken away from the point of the video, which ultimately I tried to be as consistent as possible throwing, but once again I'm only a human being and I'm not perfect. So there, of course, are going to be shots that get taken out of the video that are errant shots, but Every single shot, I promise you, every single shot that was good, that was, where I was looking at least at my target or extremely close to it, that, is worthy of being comparative with the other ball, whatever ball I was throwing, then those shots were in the video. And I promise you that. Please take my word on that, because I wanted to be as serious as possible in this video. And I'm not trying to call out any manufacturers. I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just trying to show you guys a test that I wanted to do and the results of the test. Now, what I do want to challenge the manufacturers on, and I said this at the end of the last video, I would be interested in seeing more updated data on this from the manufacturers like Storm and Motive, who have these claims on their websites, because I don't quite understand exactly where that this is coming from. They do a lot of testing, especially at Storm, and I have a lot of confidence in their tests, and I know that they work very hard on that, and so I'm certain that they can do something to, similar to this, but even on a bigger scale, or a much fancier version of it that would be hopefully a little bit better, because I don't have much budget just running a YouTube channel like I do, but I know that they would be able to do that. And I want to also state that this is from 2017 on Storm's website. That's when the write-up is from, as you can see in the URL. And then I don't know exactly when this is from. On Motive's website, it obviously is from after the new rule changes that they're talking about in the third bullet point under symmetrical balls came out. So I know it had to be sometime around then at least. But I do just want to point out that I would love to see a more updated, a newer study on this, just kind of show, maybe with Specto, or show some sort of significance into their data that they're able to get with, the ability that they have as manufacturers, so that things can be more clear in the bowling world. Because, looking at all this data and coming into the pro shop, talking to me as a pro shop operator, is very important, but it doesn't mean anything if it's not clear to the consumer. We want to be very clear whenever we're selling a bowling ball, because we can sell you, a proton physics, and you might think that it's supposed to hook the entire lane, that you can hook the entire lane with it, but it's simply not the case, because a ball like that is designed to hook very early and be very smooth, so you're not going to be able to hook the whole lane with it. Whereas if you buy something like lower end, like a High Road Pearl, or even like the entry level balls, like a Hustle Wine or an Electrify Go, just to, throw something examples out there. Balls like those, you're going to see a lot more right to left motion with, because they're storing energy, they're going down the lane, they're shinier as well, so they're going to get down the lane much easier, and then they're going to have that bigger back end. And now, based on this data, I am convinced that they also do that because they're symmetric, because the cores inside of them are symmetric versus the asymmetric cores, and allow them to not be smooth motion, not have that inherent smooth motion like the proton physics in my example, but rather to have the more violent down lane motion like a High Road Pearl will, or something like an Electrify Go. Those will have that more violent, snappy motion, as it's usually often referred to as in the bowling world, just simply because that ball motion is created by the cover stock being shiny and the ability to store energy, the weakness of the cover stock, but also the core inside of it. Not only that it's a weak core, but that it's symmetric. Because then you're seeing that the ball is storing that energy. It's going 44 feet down the lane as the idle Cosmos was, as compared to 43 where the reality was, or 41 or 42, when the reality did that, and the Cosmos still went 43 or 44 feet. It's very important to pay attention to these things. I had both balls at the same surface, with brand new pads each. I had both balls at the same layout and very, very similar top weights and the exact same amount of ounces in it, and I drilled them the exact same way, and I took the same amount out of each bowling ball for the switch grip and the finger holes. You can get into it as deeply as you want to dive into the data, but I want to say that I'm simply trying to show you the data and interpret it in the best way possible, and that's why I've presented it here before you completely transparently. I wish that I could go even more in depth, but there's, just so much that I don't have the ability to do. But I wanted to present the data, show you guys this, and do the biggest project that I've ever done on my YouTube channel before. So, guys, I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you for watching. Huge shout out to Hank at Storm for helping me out, for sending these bowling balls for this test. It means a lot that he's willing to support my YouTube channel and help me do this test. And I hope. My hope is that hopefully we can see some more data come out from manufacturers to show, their interpretation of symmetric versus asymmetric cores, and just kind of gain an understanding underneath that. And I want to say thank you to you guys for watching. Be sure to check out part 1 if you haven't yet. But guys, thank you again. Be sure to subscribe below as well. I've got a really cool video upcoming. I teased it in part 1. It's all about urethane. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Leave a like below if you liked it, and leave your comments. Just tell me what do you think about this test that I did, and do you like the way I presented the data? Do you like the way that I presented what I was seeing on the lanes during the first half of the video? Just let me know if you have any thoughts on that as well. So thanks, guys, and I'll see you later.